Good morning. My name is Steve Taylor. I think I've met a few of you before when we've been up in Forest to visit, and I'm really hoping today to be able to see you and meet you again face to face. But unfortunately, that was not in the Lord's will. Um, we're all still within our four walls, and it's been like that for a little while now. And so this morning, it felt appropriate for us to look together at a bit of a biblical reflection on isolation. This is quite near to my heart because back in October, our little girl Zoe, she's about to turn 2, was diagnosed with cancer. And she's now kind of post treatment, recovered and happy, but it's been a challenging kind of time for us, and we've been in isolation more or less since October, apart from a couple of weeks. We've been in our church physically, maybe twice, and we managed to make it to another one on a handful of more occasions. But isolation is hard, and I'm not going to pretend for a moment this morning that that's can be easily changed, but it's something which we do encounter again and again through the scriptures, and so it's something that's appropriate for us to reflect on and to think about. And I think we know ourselves at this stage that there are common difficulties that we come across. There's things like loneliness, anxiety, fear, a sense of powerlessness, of not being able to change what's going on, not being able to plan a holiday. Or, I mean, here and now, I was meant to be in Malta, kind of celebrating the end of Zoe's treatment, and then that all got cancelled. All the stuff we'd been looking forward to is just gone, and now life is just in that perpetual limbo of what can we do. We can struggle with kind of an inward rebelliousness, because when that is coming on us from above and people are saying, don't go outside, don't do this, we can feel, actually, I can do all right, I can do what I want with this and I'll be fine and it won't hurt anybody. And we struggle being told what to do sometimes. I know I do. Um, we can get a real sense of boredom and repetition, that our life goes from having kind of, you know, 7, 8, 10, 15 different events that recur to suddenly being just the same day that repeats. And maybe we've got a couple of variations, but just that monotony and boredom can really set in quite quickly. We can feel that mourning and that loss. I mean, yes, first of all, if there is something genuinely um, wrong with the world, there are people near to us that die. We had a member of our congregation um, who died this morning, not from coronavirus, but from something else. And it hurts that we can't be near their family at this time, that they're kind of stuck by themselves. And like, it's hard dealing with things by yourself. And it's hard dealing with the loss of every other opportunity in our life. We can't take our children to play group, we can't go for a walk up a hill to the beach. There aren't many beaches on hills. You know what I'm saying. We struggle with the things we've lost or might lose. We get kind of a loss of our stable pattern of life. That the reality is that we mostly thrive on that stable, repeated pattern. That we kind of go to sleep at a decent time, we wake up at a decent time, do the same sort of things, and that pattern is part of what we've built into our lives. Especially as Christians, we are creatures of habit, creatures of pattern. We build in our devotionals, we build in our Bible study, we build them around and through the pattern of our life. And when that breaks, that's hard. And then we get kind of difficulties like disappointment, and just repeated disappointment of life not turning out the way that we'd hoped, or even the things that we now hope for. I mean, there's not many of them, but I mean, that we really hope for our small group on Wednesday nights and on the evenings when nobody turns up, or not as many as we'd hoped. You just get that disappointment where we're looking forward to seeing people, but it's not happening again. And and lastly, but not by any means least, with that kind of break of the pattern of our life, there can be a real opportunity for sin, for things that we struggle with to kind of resurge in us and take hold of our lives, just with all the opportunity of us sitting around by ourselves, thinking, worrying. We can kind of begin kind of inflamed with pride, jealousy, anger, lust, you name it. If we struggle with it, we struggle with it more when we're alone and when we don't have the strength and support that we are used to. And so, with all of that in mind, we remember that we are not the first. We are not the only ones who have ever been through this. And there's characters all the way through the Bible. I'm thinking, all the way from Noah, Joseph, Moses, Samuel, David, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Jonah, all the way through to John the Baptist, and Jesus, and Paul, and John. Through the scriptures, this repeated pattern of people, sometimes by choice, often not, going into periods of isolation. And so we're anchoring this morning in Acts chapter 16. It's got a very short period of isolation, but it's one that does typify the type of responses that we see faithful believers making in situations of isolation. So Acts chapter 16, if you want to turn with me, we'll start at verse 16. Once, when we were going to the place of prayer, this is Paul writing, we were met by a slave girl who had a spirit by which she predicted the future. She earned a great deal of money for her owners by fortune telling. This girl followed Paul and the rest of us, shouting, "These men are servants of the Most High God, who are telling you the way to be saved." She kept this up for many days, and finally Paul became so troubled that he turned around and said to the spirit, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to come out of her." And at that moment, the spirit left her. When the owners of the slave girl realized that their hope of making money was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace to face the authorities. They brought them before the magistrates and said, "These are Jews and are throwing the city into an uproar by advocating customs unlawful for us Romans to accept or to practice." The crowd joined in to attack against Paul and Silas, and the magistrates ordered them to be stripped and beaten. And after they had been severely flogged, they were thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. Upon receiving such orders, he put them in the inner cell and fastened their feet in the stocks. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Suddenly, there was such a violent earthquake that the foundations of the prisons were shaken. At once, all the prison doors flew open, and everybody's chains came loose. The jailer woke up, and when he saw the prison doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, because he thought the prisoners had escaped. But Paul shouted, "Don't harm yourself, we are all here." The jailer called for lights, rushed in, and fell trembling before Paul and Silas. He then brought them out and asked, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" And they replied, "Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household." And then they spoke the word of the Lord to him and to all the others in his house. At that hour of the night, the jailer took them and washed their wounds, and then immediately he and all his family were baptized. So there were three things that we kind of see of Paul that are typical of believers in isolation, both in the New Testament and long after as well. First of all, it is really critical for us to invite God into our suffering. It sounds like a bit of a no-brainer, but the reality is that we often just continue, and we can feel bad about our suffering. It can get to us, and we don't consciously bring the Lord into the situation. And so for Paul and Silas, yes, they've been stripped, they've been flogged, they've been kind of brought into the inner cell and had themselves kind of fastened by their ankles to the wall. And in all that, it'd be very tempting just to turn to each other and to moan and to groan about it and then to get some sleep. Oh, this can only get better, right? But what do we see? That actually, about midnight, like, there's no, oh my goodness, I'm so tired, let's get some rest. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God and bringing God into the midst of that prison. We feel like we're in a prison sometimes, just not leaving the same room for an extended duration of time. It just feels like a little cell around us. And yet we know that God is always present. And there is always that opportunity to bring him into the situation with us. And so no matter how isolated we feel, God is there. We see this throughout the scriptures. Think about Job. Lost everything, and yet God was with him beginning to end, and especially comes to redeem at the end. We think about Joseph, who was thrown down a well by his own brothers, sold into captivity, ultimately put into prison by his own employer, and even then God was present from beginning to end in his story. At any moment, especially the moments of isolation, God was at work. I also think about Jeremiah, that Jeremiah was lonely at the best of times without, having taken a wife or anything, and then to be in the midst of this kind of siege of Jerusalem and kind of having to prophesy against everything, and then he gets thrown into another well, a lot of wells going around. And again, we know that God is with him in all these things. And so how much more for us when we are generally safe and warm and able to get food, even able to get Netflix. How much more is God with us in our situation? And so we need to kind of think about all the time that we've gained back. I know for some of us, we are busier than ever, and I don't want to get away from that. Some of us are just having to work flat out harder than ever before, and that is hard. But for many of us, we have gained time back. We're no longer commuting, we're no longer doing many of our other daily, weekly activities, and we have gained hours and hours back into our week. And the temptation, what the enemy in the world would have of us, is to plunge all that extra time back into hobbies and renovations and Netflix and all the things that we really, otherwise would put our spare time into. And this is me, this is all of us. We've been loving this new Netflix series, which we've been watching, which is why I've said it like 3 times in the last minute. But if we've gained all this time back and very little or none of it is actually going back into our own discipleship and bringing Jesus into our situation and using that time, tithing some of that time back, that is a red flag. A young lad that I disciple actually, he's really struggled for a long time with kind of growing as a Christian, getting into his Bible. He's never really been much of a reader, and actually in these kind of first couple of weeks of isolation is the first time in his life he's really kind of picked up his Bible, and he is kind of, igniting at the moment in his faith and in terms of using the opportunity that God has given him to seek him in the quiet moments when he's in his 4 walls all day long. The question is true for all of us. How do we invite God back into our situation, into the new hours that we have gained? And so on that token, it's important that we don't neglect the normal components of a Christian life. that we don't neglect gathering together as much as we're able, that wherever there's a chance to join with each other in calls or small groups, even just kind of, calling somebody up to find out how they're doing, how their day is going. Gathering together is core for Christians. We are not designed to live just me and God. I'm not designed to be perfect in this one-to-one relationship. If I don't have input from my brothers and sisters around me, I and my faith journey are going to suffer. I'm not going to grow the same way that I will with the input, discipleship, encouragement, challenge, and the kind of one-to-one leaning with other brothers and sisters as we're designed to have it. This is more important a time than ever for connecting with other brothers and sisters if that's not something that we normally do. This is a time when we're all in need. Let's not forget to pray. If we don't have a good prayer rhythm in our life, and I don't myself, I'm still working on this. We need to work on it. We need to find space and time and purpose in the way that we pray. And praying for the people that we are meaning to pray for and keep saying that we will pray for. People that we're meaning to check in on and catch up with. And the many people that really look to us for encouragement and support. Especially our family, our immediate family, and the leaders of our church who are under a lot of pressure right now. We can't neglect the kind of reading of the scripture. There's a great opportunity to either directly sit down and read new portions, read things we've not read before, buy in some decent studies from Amazon, find stuff that you really engage with, and if you're struggling with that, if you're at the end of yourself in terms of Bible study, ask, talk to somebody, talk to a leader in your church, somebody who loves the Bible. Like, there must be somebody that comes to mind, somebody that really, the moment they open the scriptures, they are alive and they are buzzing, and there are parts which they know kind of cover to cover almost. Ask people for tips on how do we get back engaged with the scriptures in a fresh way. How do we reignite our faith in a fresh way in this time? And actually, don't underplay kind of audio Bibles as well. I mean, if we're just milling around the house and doing other things, gardening, whatever, why not stick on an audio Bible and listen to something through that we've not listened to for a while? One of the Gospels, or maybe something that we've just not touched for a long time. I once listened through to the whole book of Ezekiel in a day at work, and I didn't necessarily listen to all of it, but I did pick up things that did kind of refresh my mind. And there's great ways that we can do this in this time. That's what I'm getting at here. And last of all, the fact is that this is hard, and there are things that we are struggling with, genuinely struggling and suffering and worrying and fear and doubt. And the reality is that our Bible is filled with situations and people who are feeling these same emotions and these same situations. We've named a few of them, especially those who are kind of going through periods of isolation in their life. I love Jeremiah and the kind of oppression and mourning and lostness that goes on around him. And it's been said before that every situation of human suffering is an invitation into the heart of God. Wherever we begin to hurt, wherever we begin to kind of really feel that in our souls, in our beings, God is there. And he's been through it, he's done it through the life of Jesus and other places. There are places to engage with God and find out God's heart in our situation. So first of all, let's invite God into our situation of suffering. Second of all, have patience. Easy to say, right? Patience is fundamentally one of the key Christian qualities. If you believe the earliest Christians and those that were writing, 1st, 2nd, 3rd century, they say it time and time again. They didn't write a single line about evangelism, but they wrote 3 treatises on patience, saying that patience was the fundamental Christian quality, the quality of being able to wait on God and being able to expect him to be at work in us and in the world around to be able to wait through situations of suffering, situations of doubt, situations of fear, and to be that calm presence in our situations, because ultimately God is at rest in our situations. And so it's something that we need to learn to embody. And actually, solitude, although it's something which we're not very good at today, but that is a Christian discipline, it's a Christian practice. It's something that as we grow in our discipleship, we need to get better at solitude, at finding spaces and places and times to be at rest and to invite God and just to soak in Him. And if we're anxious, if we're worried, if we're not happy being at rest, that's a good something to practice and to think about, to read about, to grow in. I'm currently in the middle of a book which is all about how the early church essentially grew exponentially by virtue of patience. Not strategy, not power. I mean, they had power, but by patience and exemplifying that in their culture. Because that's definitely not our culture. We are in a culture that is terrified of what's going on right now. They just, they want it all to be over. They want us just all to be, back at work and getting on with life and just really anxious about the pause, anxious about the waiting, anxious about not being able to get on with things, anxious about the news headlines, what's going on with countries and statistics and politicians. And that's all coming on the back of a couple of years of chronically big and bad situations of fear and doubt and loss. And the question is, how do we embody Christ in this world, in this culture that is chronically at unrest, that chronically is in a situation of unease and doubt and fear? The fact is that we are to embody Christ in patience, because patience and peace are powerful. In a situation of fear and doubt, you can always notice the most peaceful person in the room because they are the one that is not affected. I know you guys don't really do oil and gas as much up north. In my head, I just always think of these big oil pipelines where you've got kind of all this oil rushing through and all these little swirls and currents that can destroy equipment. And what you do is you put in flow straighteners. You put in like little lines that when the oil passes through, it breaks up all the currents and eddies and it starts to go straight again. Maybe a more familiar analogy, if you think about the beach, if you think about a harbour, often you put rocks out at the edge to break up the waves so that, if you've got a big rough sea, it's broken up by the rocks and it becomes calm in the harbour. As Christians in our society, in our culture, on our street, in our families, we are to be those rocks of patience, embodying Christ in our situations, breaking up that kind of turmoil and fear and worry, and resetting the level. And actually, because our confidence is not that everything's going to be okay, our confidence is that God has everything in hand, that there is a plan for everything and He will redeem everything and bring everything together. We don't fear about the world changing or even ending, because beyond it we see Jesus, and Jesus tells us everything is going to be okay. We are waiting for Him after all. He's going to come back. And so we need to get into that habit of being the non-anxious presence in our situations. There's a famous analyst who deals with families and companies. He's a rabbi as well. His name is Edwin Friedman. And he came up with this term, non-anxious presence. That essentially in every family, in every company, in every culture, every country, there's that potential of everything descending into chaos and madness. And really, the powerful, transformative thing is one person. That's all it takes to start it. Being a non-anxious presence, not being affected by every news story, every article, every change in statistics and trends and policies, but rather being steady and sound. And for us as Christians, we find that in Jesus. And we see that in Paul and Silas here in the prison, that although everybody else would be fearful and worried, what are they doing? They're praying and singing hymns to God. And when the jailbreak occurs, and suddenly, the expectation for the jailer is, oh, everybody's going to run out and escape, because that's what prisoners do when it breaks open. That's life. But actually, Paul and Silas, leading the other prisoners, decide to be patient, decide to be present in the situation and not to be overcome. They're in this moment of prayer and singing when the prison blows, and that has consequence. If we're inviting God into our situation, we are enabled to be that transformative, patient power. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Don't be conformed to all the fluctuations and fears and currents going on around you, but be transformed into the likeness of Christ. So, invite God into our suffering. Have patience. Be a non-anxious presence in the situation. And third of all, look for God's opportunities. It is one thing to bring God into our situation, but it's another to look out towards what God is doing. And that's exactly what we see in Paul and Silas, that they are not even just looking at the other prisoners. They're actually looking out as far as the jail warden, the one that has put their feet in those shackles. And, there'd be that sense of, is he not just going to do it again? But actually, they see his fearful, anxious heart. And they minister to him and say, no, it's going to be okay. And because of that, this man comes to faith along with his entire family. Because these two men invited God in, they were patient and non-anxious in their situation, and they were looking for what God was doing. He wasn't just breaking them out of their prison and letting them get on with what they were doing before, but he was doing something new in the place where they were. And so we have to be in that place. As Jesus says to us, love your neighbor as yourself. As kind of Paul says to us in Philippians, that we are to, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. Do nothing out of selfish ambition, nothing out of vain self-conceit, but consider others better than yourselves. Now is a time to focus on those around us, because we're all in this boat. And for every one and two of us that are stuck in our houses with our families, there's another two or three that are stuck in houses by themselves. People who maybe were already isolated, and then when we got to see a couple of people a week, and now we don't get to see anybody. And we need you. We need you to get in touch. We need you to call us. We need to know that other people care. How can we care for and help those who are around us and that we don't get to see? And so, the challenge is kind of, how do we do this? Who can we bless? This is something that we see again and again through the Bible. If you think about Paul specifically, this is a tiny little episode of isolation, let's be honest. Later on, the very end of Acts 28, Paul is in prison for 2 years. 2 years under house arrest, not being able to go out for a wander like we do every day. And what does he do? He writes 1/4 of the New Testament. He writes to churches, he writes to individuals. He thinks, who can I encourage? Who can I lift up? Who can I challenge? How can God use me without me leaving the four walls of my house? And we're not all going to write letters to churches, but we can send a text message. We can find ways to communicate with others. And you know, I start that by saying text message, but that's actually pretty impersonal. A text message is okay. A WhatsApp is a bit better, but let's get better than that. Let's actually call people. Let's find more personal ways to engage with each other, to do more in the way of video calling, and even just the power of leaving a good voicemail. One of our main pastors at Hillview is great at this. He doesn't tend to write very much on WhatsApp at all. He records little voice messages and lets them go. And it's a great, more intimate way of connecting with each other. It's okay to read a couple of words, but actually hearing the conviction of somebody's voice as they're sharing with you makes all the difference. And so, I don't want to kind of go on too long here, but there are people throughout our Bibles who go through these situations just like us. Situations of isolation, where they can't go out and leave the well or wherever it is that they've ended up. And all they can do is invite God into the situation, have patience with the situation, and look for what God's doing. And so, how are we going to do this week? How can you make better use of the time that you get? How can you invite God into your situation, make more space for gathering, more space for reading, more space for praying, and kind of just asking God, please, would you spend this time with me, Father? How can we be that non-anxious presence in our families, in the places that we influence, in amongst kind of social media and everywhere else, and not contribute to the ongoing anxiety and fear? What do we need to change in our own hearts so that we can actually have that peace in itself, in order that we can live that out? And where is God looking to work in your life? Who is he looking to reach through you? Who is he looking to connect with, to challenge, encourage? Even, who would he have you go to for support, to ask for that input, to share that you're struggling? We need to remember that we are the church, that we belong together before we belong apart. We will be with one another forevermore, and there's never a time like the present for being able to grow in that, and to be able to connect with each other, to kind of make all these scriptures come alive, that talk about the church being a body, that talk about us really being that kind of presence and house of God together. I mean, the house, if we are in individual bricks of that house that is the church, you can't remain an individual brick for long. We need to build together, we need to grow together. And so it's been a privilege to share with you all this morning, or whatever time it is when you watch this. But I'd like to just close by kind of commending all of us to God. Father, we thank you so much that none of this catches you by surprise. We didn't see this coming. We didn't really even know this sort of stuff could happen. But you always knew that this period would come in our lives. You always planned this. You always designed this. You know the opportunities that lie ahead of us. You know the things that you would have us do. Would you guide us? Would you lead us? Help us, Father, to turn away from the things that distract us, the things that turn us back towards the world and away from you. And help us to grow in our walk with you. Would this be a season for planting and for watering. Let this be a season where we grow as brothers and sisters, grow as a church, grow in our relationships, those around us, grow as those who influence and encourage and build up those that we interact with from day to day. We love you. I pray especially for those who are the most isolated in forests. I pray especially for those who haven't seen anybody face to face in this past week. Lord, be near them. Holy Spirit, comfort them. Holy Spirit, call your people to action. Call them to intervene, to talk, to call, to show your love and your care for everybody. We love you and we need you. For however long this lasts, we trust this time to you. And we long to see your kingdom come in and through this difficult and dark situation. Lord Jesus, we love you. Be with us this week in Jesus' name. Amen.